You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
If you can't put an hour a week or a couple hours a week into growing a business on the side, how are you going to do it full time? It's not going to happen. So start there and see and prototype it and say, hey, can I build this out in a smaller capacity? So when I do have full time, then I can just blow this up and just make this, exponential growth if I want. That's step one. And then step two is, again, knowing what you want. Like, what kind of lifestyle do you want? I think is really important. I want the autonomy. I want some control. I want to be able to do certain things. I want to be able to travel, but also do work if I want. Like, if I want to take off a month, I want to be able to do that because for whatever reason. So I think knowing kind of what you want can help you lead in that direction.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Brian, welcome to The Break. So happy to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so pumped that you reached out to me. You reached out to me and immediately I just felt like a lot of alignment. We've been through a lot of the similar situations. We care about a lot of similar things. And so I thought it would be perfect to have you on and talk about this topic of what it means to just get started. Like, that's what your kind of mission is about. And whether it's getting started with making like a habitual change or just getting started with like career and being intentional and creating that business maybe that you wanted to do or whatever, like what does it take to just get started? There's so many blockers. There's so many excuses. Life is just swirling around us. And so I really wanted to have kind of like a good tactical discussion with an expert like you who knows what it takes. And so I really appreciate you being here. This is going to be a super fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It seems like looking at your background, that's one of the reasons I reached out to you. Like, you've been through the suck, you've been through the, overcoming the fear. And I'm sure you're still doing it just like I am on a day-to-day basis, and trying to figure it out. Why just get started is my mission.
Love it.
And it really the first thing that really stemmed was this wanting to start a podcast. And I had wanted to start a podcast for a couple of years in 2015 and 2016, and I kept stubbing my toe. I had all these different ideas, but I never actually got started. And in late summer 2017, so about the time of recording this now, I said, and I just kind of, I don't remember the exact day, but it's one of these things, this, over like a period of years, it was just like battling myself in that mirror and like, why are you not doing stuff? And I was changing a lot as a person. I was becoming more confident, but I was still very scared to do things. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day I just said, dude, just get started, like do something. And then I said, just get started. That could be like, maybe that's the premise of this podcast. Like, maybe there's people that are just like me. Maybe they're a step or two behind. They haven't gone through all the crap the last few years that I have, all this discovery to get to a point where I am today, where I am confident to do this. Maybe I'll do a podcast on that topic alone. And I had an idea of like, entrepreneurship was still fairly new to me over the last handful of years before that. It's something I wanted to do my own business. I wanted to kind of be involved in that circle. So I said, maybe I can interview people that are getting started, that have done this already. And the just is very intentional. It could have easily been get started, right? But just do it, like just get started. It's kind of like an action now. Because I think for most of us, and you could probably relate, is we always have like, oh, I'm going to do whatever. And then there's like this pause of, well, let me go do some research, or let me think about it, or let me do whatever. And so the just, like I said, is really intentional. I underscore that, highlight it, circle it. It's take an action today. Even if it's the smallest step, we have to take an action forward to move us in the right direction. So that's the premise of just get started. and kind of how that concept became. Now it's become kind of my life's mission. At the time, it was just I wanted to start this podcast. I thought it'd be cool. Now it's really become something that I want to do for the next 50 years because I realize so many people struggle with this, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what I'm really interested in is how we get to that point. I mean, I think about the default programming and the way that society is set up. It is set up for us to research and wait, right? All of school is study theoretical concepts, do math, do all of these things, learn skills, and wait to some point in time where you're finally like out making money, producing value, or whatever that is. Like the whole higher educational system is set up that way as well. And the irony is that when you get out into the real world and you have some experience, like you do learn, at least if you're in business and have any ear towards entrepreneurship, you learn the fastest when you are taking those actions. And so I love that, like you can read to your heart's content, but really you're just trying to like hope that at some point in time you get some motivation to do the thing instead of just doing the thing now and risking that it might not work, risking that somebody, you know, sees you look awkward or whatever it is, right? All of these beliefs that we may put in our heads. So to me, like I love Just Get Started because it just cuts across the fabric of how society is layered today. And it's like, guys, like get out, be sloppy, start to take the actions on whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to hit that. And then I got to double click on a couple things. So number one, what was it about podcasting that made you want to do that?
Well, podcasting was this intersection of a few different things. One, I love podcasting back in that time. So as I mentioned, 2017, I started the podcast, but the several years prior, I started to really listen to a lot of podcasts. Tim Ferriss has probably been the one I've listened to the most over the last, 9 years, let's call it, if we start 2015. So he's been like a big inspiration to me. So I love podcasting. It was becoming more popular too. I loved interviewing. So growing up, and this is where like a lot of childhood stuff, good and bad, helps us. The good, I remember I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandmother, I remember always going over there like during summer breaks or whatever. And she'd sit, she used to have in like her little living room and had this TV. It must have been like a 13-inch TV. And I can't even remember if it was black and white or color, but we used to watch like Oprah and Regis and Kathy Lee and, Phil Donahue. Like all of these, people that did interview shows. And I just love like sitting there and listening to conversation. I don't know why, but I just love that. And even like when I started watching a lot of sports, like I noticed I loved like listening to like, an interview that they would do with the athlete or something. And I just liked the dialogue and I was learning or what have you. And then the third component is I had a teacher, Mr. Hines, and he taught public speaking and sports literature in high school in senior year. And I'll never forget, and this is a story I tell a lot because it's one of those things that confidence-wise, I had zero confidence as a kid. And we can get into that if we want. But the gist of it is I had zero confidence. But something about him, like he saw in me. And one day he pulled me aside as I was leaving class and in public speaking. And he said, "Brian, you have great pitch and tone. You should be on radio someday." Now, I never thought I had a good voice. I still question myself, but people all the time like, "Oh, Brian, you have a really deep voice and you're articulate and whatever." I'm like, okay, cool. So he said that and it never left me because I would get random people that came up to me and say like, "Oh, you have a great voice," and all this stuff. So I tell those couple stories to say they just kind of all intersected of like, I loved interviewing. So I wanted to do an interview show. Podcasting was becoming popular. And then I was like, well, let's use my voice, right? I could have done it maybe a different way. I could have done videos and shown stuff on YouTube maybe or something, who knows? But I said, all right, let's use my voice and let's interview. And that's kind of how the intersection of podcasting came about and why I decided to do an interview show versus just me talking or something like that. So that's kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah, I love that you outline that because finding that magic in yourself is connecting dots. And again, I go back to programming, like the dots we are sort of taught to connect or to pay attention to are like hard skills, logic, all of these different types of things. But like huge advantage can be gained or recognized in your life when you start to tap into things that you are just naturally inclined to do. You don't even know why. But like you thinking about, I used to love watching these shows, Phil Donahue as a kid with my grandma. And then saying, there's something to that. I need to pull on that thread. I don't know why, but I need to pull on that thread. And then you see another, data point, right? Somebody somewhere said you had a good voice, and you start, interesting. I'm going to weave that together. And you start to think about all of these different things that you just naturally like to do. And all of a sudden, boom, you have an intersection. Like I want to talk to you about the confidence stuff because we have very relatable experiences, but like I had a very similar stretch where like I didn't know what I was good at. I felt like a generalist. I didn't feel like I had any real innate talents, but I started to try to like go into my past and pull things together. And people used to say like, hey, you're a good speaker. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what in the hell to do with that at all. But then when I really started to pay attention to it, that's when I got like into, okay, there's this podcast thing. I can use this. It doesn't have to be to make money. It can be to learn. It can be to meet new people. It can be to just make me feel good. All of these different things. And that's like how you sort of start to create advantage, or at least things that you can start to lever up into confidence to take the next step in whatever that is by pulling on some of those threads.
Yeah.
So I got to ask, what you say you were a pretty unconfident kid.
Yeah.
What do you think, how did that look? And, or take it into like maybe early, adulthood or something. How did that look? And why do you think you didn't have the confidence?
Well, I mean, it looked like I didn't make decisions for myself. One of the big things that we can get into is I talk a lot about the importance of taking control.
Right.
And things we can control and things we can't control, and just focusing on the things we can. We can probably go as far back as, 10 years or less, where I wasn't taking control. I let other people control me. I let the wind carry me left and right. I let decisions and thoughts and insights and opinions of others like really just control me. And a lot of that stemmed from childhood. I was a middle child, and that impacted me a ton because I have an older brother that I look up to, and we're very close. And the relationship is definitely more peer to peer now, but, and he's 17 months older. So like we were really close, like growing up, like age wise, we weren't too far apart. And then I have a younger sister that's 5 years younger. I tell you that to say, if it was a different dynamic, if my parents were different, because I have friends that have like very similar, like they have an older brother that's just a little older. They have a younger sister and they're the middle child, and they're totally different than I am because they had a different set of parents, the way that they were, brought up. But for me, I just always felt I was in my brother's shadow for most of my life. And it's funny, I was telling this story the other day to someone where they have two kids, one just left for college and one's, like a junior, and they didn't have this experience, but I was sharing this story, like up until senior year of high school, like I was always in my brother's shadow. It wasn't Brian. It was always Nick's brother. Like that's kind of, how it was. Cause he was fairly popular and he got in trouble a lot, but that I think lended to his popularity. But when he left, I like broke out of my shell senior year. Totally different than any other year ever in school for me. But that just goes to show, like, I started to get more confident as I got older, each and every year, slowly but surely. But I've always, for a long time, it's been a ton of work, really realizing why did I let that affect me? Why did I let that bother me? And what do I do to overcome that, to become the person I am today, which I'm extremely confident today. I still question myself, but I don't even recognize that 15-year-old Brian or 20-year-old Brian. I can't even imagine him because I've put that out of my system as much as possible, although he still creeps up from time to time. So that's a little background. I don't know if that's helpful or I was jumping around, but that's kind of the background for me of like where the confidence was lacking. And then I just had to take control to change that in another direction. And it didn't happen overnight. As you know, this stuff doesn't, this stuff creeps up, but it takes a long time to really, to manage it in the right direction.
So was there a moment though, where you recognized it? You recognized that you were flying by the wind, that you needed to take some control, that you weren't like a determining factor in the outcomes of your life? Like, was there something that just hit you in the face on that?
I don't know if there was a direct like, oh my God, I'm out of control, I need to take it. But I will say, I was actually thinking about this very recently, so it's top of mind. And actually, my brother's included in the story here. So in early 2009, I was probably like I don't know, at that time, probably like $40,000 of debt. I think maybe I got up towards closer to 50, 60 because I bought a car the year after. I tell you that to say I was in the golf industry. I was a PGA professional at the time. And I left that industry, but at the time I was a PGA professional and I was making maybe $30,000, $40,000 a year. So I was living paycheck to paycheck and barely paying rent, that type of thing. I tell you to say that based on your question is I remember my brother gifted me The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Have you ever read that book, or you know Dave Ramsey?
Yes, I know of it. I've never read it, but yes, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's a phenomenal book. Anyone that, is looking for like financial foundation of like how to get out of debt and get in the right direction, I think it's a phenomenal book. He has his debt snowball he talks about. But that was a catalyst moment for me. As I think back now, being debt-free since 2017, have built up a lot of savings and investment over the years as I started to make more money. At the time, though, I could have went left and said, whatever, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'll figure it out. I decided to, I don't know why. Maybe I was just, I think partly as I look back, I was probably fed up at the time of like, I hate living like this. Actually, I do remember having those probably internal discussions. I don't know exactly what they sounded like. It was probably a lot of swear words, but like, I hate living like this. This can't be right. So I went right. And I took that book to heart. I sold a lot of the stuff I had. And I'm talking like I was a big, are you a golfer, by the way?
I am, yes.
Okay. So I was a massive golfer. Like I met Tiger Woods back. So I grew up in Endicott, New York. The BC Open, they used to play there. That was Tiger's third tournament as a professional. So I had like a Nike hat with his original signature.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it was worth it. I mean, at the time, and whatever, it was worth $300-$400, back in whatever, 2009, I sold that. I remember selling, I remember like it on eBay, like, oh my God, I'm going to put this on eBay, but I'm like, no, you're all in on this. And I remember selling, I don't know what it was. It probably ended up being close to $1,000 or so worth of stuff where I could start that debt snowball and that emergency fund and those kind of baby steps that Dave Ramsey talks about. But that was a catalyst for me where, again, 6-ish, 7 years later, I became debt free. I tell you that story to say that was probably the first time I really remember like I'm taking control here and I'm going in a different direction than maybe I had in the past. So that's one thing that comes to mind that I'm very proud of because I can't imagine where I'd be if I went the other direction. Was
that gift unprompted from your brother? Or had you guys had discussions?
I think it was unprompted. We've always been close and we share a lot of insight and resources and stuff together. I think he had started doing it. So he probably was like, let me share this with Brian. I can't remember exactly. Next time I talk to him, I'm going to ask him about that if he remembers. So that's a good spark of conversation. But no, I think he was just trying to think differently, and he thought, hey, this could help you.
Yeah, it's the reason I asked the question is like different perspectives on your situation are so helpful, especially if they're timed right. And if it was unprompted, right? He obviously saw some struggle or heard some struggle and knew a little bit about your situation and had the courage to say, hey, check this out. And that's so powerful because, we're as humans, like we're so good at diagnosing other people's problems, but really not very good at diagnosing our own. And so it takes some courage to, one, hear it and then listen to it. So there's like in your story, you describe frustration. You describe, I'm frustrated with living this way. And I know in our audience, and certainly amongst the people that I come in contact with, that is a common feeling. What am I doing here? Doesn't matter if they're making $250,000, $300,000 a year. Some people are like, what am I doing? I've lost my purpose, whatever it is. Somebody that I talked to recently was like, Mike, I quit my job 4 years ago in my mind, but I'm still there, right? They haven't gotten started on whatever it is. So like they resonate with your feeling in that particular time in your life. So what is it? What is the key? What is the first step to just getting started, to moving out of or taking some action towards not feeling this way anymore?
I mean, that's a great question you pose because, and by the way, I think it's an ebb and flow, right? There's days we're frustrated, or days we're depressed or sad, or what have you. I think it gets less and less over time when we realize this one thing. So to answer your question directly, then we can kind of go into it deeper. I think the majority of people, high majority of people, have zero idea of what they actually want. So you talk about the guy with the job, right? What does he want? What is the job getting him? Is it a certain, I've been around so many people that like, oh, once I make X, I'm good. And this, that's not true. Nope. It's not about the money, right? There's something missing. There's something they really want, but they're not exposing themselves to it. So I'll say for me, and again, this is something that didn't happen overnight, and it's ebbed and flowed over the last, let's call it 10 years or so. But I kept trying to make decisions in the direction of like, what is my future self? Like, where do I kind of want to be? But I had no idea, by the way. Like, I couldn't tell you 10 years ago. I'm not a big believer of like, make a 10-year plan and let's try. I couldn't fathom telling you 10 years ago that I'd even be close to where I'm at today. So I'm a big believer of start where you are. So that's the first kind of advice, from my perspective, right? Is start where you are. So there's some people that are in your position. There's some people that are in so much debt. They're just frustrated with life. They have a crappy job or career, right? Maybe they just broke up in a relationship. Like, they might be at the depths of hell, right? Who knows? So start where you are. And I would encourage most folks, and again, I hope someone takes me up on it, and hopefully maybe they'll message us, is put your damn phone away for 30 minutes, get out a piece of paper, right? Get out a pen, and just think for a second. Just ask yourself, what do I want? Like, what really makes me fulfill? What makes me happy? And just jot down whatever comes to your mind. Oh, I enjoy when this happens, or this would be cool, or God, I really wish I could, I wish my parents, I can put them in a nicer house. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. Until we do that, it's so hard to map out what the next steps are until you understand that. And that's what I went through. I realized, like, for me, it was, I want to spend more time with my son. He's number one priority. I want to figure out, how do I spend more time with him? A lot of that came down to, I don't want to work in corporate America anymore because, well, one, I didn't want to work in an office anymore. COVID helped that to move me remote. So that was nice to be able to come remote a lot more. But two is, I said, I want more flexibility. I want to take my son to school. I want to pick him up. I want to go do different events he has. Well, not that I can't do that, but the more successful I get being and I'm in a software sales role, the more successful I get there, I'm going to have to travel more. I'm going to have to be, again, more on site with clients. I may have to have meetings at various times, with different time zones. Like, there's a lot of other things. Sure, I might make more money, but money has never been number one for me. I want enough to be able to live by and to be able to support my family and obviously for some future things, but it's never been number one. So I don't make decisions based on money, right? It's the reason, I think we were talking about this earlier, like, you don't do ads or anything for your podcast. I don't either. I don't do that right now. Would I be open to it? Sure, I'll take phone calls, but I haven't done that because I want to do it my way, right? So anyways, that's kind of the first step. I'm sorry, I went on a big tangent there. I get really I love talking about this. That's my first step. Anyone that's like, God, I don't know how to get started. Well, sit and think. Think first, like, what do you really want to do? And by the way, after you do that, simplify it. Like, what's one thing you've been wanting to do that you haven't started with? So, I wanted to write this book, or I wanted to start a garden, or I wanted to play pickleball, or I don't care what it is. If we know that, now we can start mapping out sort of a plan to do the first couple steps after that. But until we know that, it's really hard to even, I'm such a believer, Mike, it has to be down on paper. It cannot sit up here in our head. When it's up in our head, it's not true. When it's on paper, we now have to live with it because it's true. So that's where I would start. And then there's a lot of things we can do after that, but that's the starting point.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I think where most people get hung up is they're like, I don't have time. I'm so raw. I got all this stuff going on. I can't do it. The first thing that has to happen is you need to be able to create some space in order to think beyond tomorrow. And so exactly what you're talking about. In my program where I help, high achieving corporate professionals figure out how to build their dream business and sort of leave corporate. This is the first outcome. How do we create space for you to figure out what it is that you actually want? Then you can create sort of that future vision, that vision of yourself, right? And really get in there. So I love that. And I also love the piece where it's like, okay, what do you want? Now simplify it. Pick one thing. And this is about momentum. This is about action and momentum. Pick one thing. And what's the next action? What's the action you could take? Because guess what that does, folks? You may be wrong about what you want. But if you take that next action and you try it out, you're going to get actual data and feedback because you took an action that informs the next idea or the next thing that you want. You're building that muscle. You're being experimental. And you can also start to play life like a game and have more fun with the whole process and sort of let go of the outcomes when you're taking action. Oh, isn't that interesting? I didn't like that as much as I thought I would. Okay, on to the next thing. So I just love that whole idea, Brian. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, you know why it's important? And I wonder if you find this with folks you work with. I think when you put a goal further out in the distance, so let's use write a book, because that's a big goal. I don't know how many people you talk to. I can't count the amount of people that have come up to me and said, oh, I want to write a book, or Brian, I want to write children's books too. Like, where's the book? Yeah. They never showed me their book that they've created, because you know why? It's so far out in the distance, it allows them to procrastinate. They're like, I don't work on it today. I'll put some time in tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's busy. I'll put it next day. And they can kick the can down the road. So like, here's a great example. So let's use that. I want to write a book. Okay, that's cool. Let's write a book. How about instead though, you write a blog between 250 and 500 words. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to even make it simpler. I was going to say every day. Let's do it once a week. For the next 10 weeks, let's write one blog, open a Substack account for free, or do it on LinkedIn, post it, 250 to 500 words for the next 10 weeks, once a week. Pick a time. Let's see if you can do that. Because if you can't even do that, how are you going to write a book? Right? And I'll give you, so this actually, now I'm thinking about it. I'll tell you this story because I think maybe this will resonate with folks. Is I'm writing my first self-development book right now. But I look up to all these great writers, Stephen Pressfield and, Ryan Holiday. I love reading his stuff. And I'm not a full-time writer, I can't sit down every day, most likely. I probably can in reality, but it's really challenging to sit down for an hour or two and write and just focus on writing. I have all these other things, priorities going on. So I made a decision this year. I said, okay, I'm not letting that excuse get in my way anymore, because I tried to write some books in past years and failed miserably. So I said, here's what I'm doing. Every week by Sunday, I'm writing 500 words minimum. Every week. That's it. 500 words every week. And I said, if I can't do that, then you're never going to publish a book. So I made it super simple. And now I'm on week 34. I've written every week. And note the thing is, there's plenty of weeks I wrote more 500 words. I have like 26,000 words already written. So now I'm well on track to have the book finished by the end of the year, only because I took a small action step and it's just added up over a long period of time. And that's where I think a lot of folks miss, is they think I'm going to do it in one full swoop and just got to get it done. And that never happens. You have to chunk it out. It's just like getting in shape. You don't get in shape with one session. You do it over a myriad of sessions over months and years. So that's what I would, again, if you're procrastinating and you're thinking, oh, I'll put it out in the distance, I'll do it. Start today. Just do it small. Why not?
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense. And now, folks in the audience, like, I need to highlight something, because I talk about getting out of corporate, building a dream business all the time, right? But Brian's story, he's doing these things. So he mentioned he's written children's books, he podcasts, right? He does coaching and does other things. Guess what? He has a full-time job. That's right. He's still at his full-time job. So I want to bring this around and all the stuff about chunking and making things small and just starting. You can do that when you have a full-time job, when you have family responsibilities, when you have all of these other things. So I want to steer the conversation a little bit into that realm for people who are like sitting at their cubicle and listening to this, right? Like, they have a dream, but they haven't done anything. Chunking one, but like, talk a little bit about some of the other things maybe you have had to overcome, or challenges you've dealt with, how you've dealt with them in order to continue to make progress and just start, like, while you have all of these other responsibilities. Yeah. I do the same thing, and I want your perspective.
Yeah. So let's break that out in a few different areas. So yeah, you're right. I still have my software sales corporate job. This though goes back to what I mentioned earlier. So let's just underscore that before we get into this, is I made a decision many years ago that I'm going to leave corporate America and I'm going to run my own business. And that's what I want to do, because I don't want the handcuffs of corporate America. But I didn't leave that day. I gave myself a long period of time. I had a certain number I wanted in my bank account for me, from a comfort level, because I knew this doesn't happen overnight. Like, you're not going to build a business and all of a sudden the money's just going to flow in. So I want to make sure, for me, and a lot of this now, we can get into this, a lot of this comes down to like my upbringing with like money and finances and how I was taught about those. We talked about the debt already. Like, I've already had like probably negative money issues in the past that I like continue to work on. So I want to make sure I had enough to give me 18 to 24 months of living expenses in case I shit the bed the first 6 to 8 months. I'm still good. So I wanted to level set that to say, that's the first step is, okay, let's say I want to leave corporate. Cool. What are my, like, you know, if I'm jumping out of the airplane with that pair, like, what are my levers right now to pull? Is it a number I want the bank? Is it I want to give myself a certain period of time? Is it I want to get a product up and running? You know, maybe it's if you're doing a software product, maybe it's an MVP or something like that. Or maybe if it's a coaching or service business, maybe I want to have, 3 clients before I justify leave. Whatever that is, that's something you have to decide. And I think if you decide what those constraints are and you put them in play, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. Because what did we just talk about? Stuff's up in your head. I'll leave. Yeah, when I get whatever. Sure. Yeah, I think if I make this much more money, I'll probably leave. And then you don't. Right? So anyways, that's first. From a time stamp, is that helpful, by the way? Let me pause there. No,
100%. Like, yeah, what I want people to understand is like this, normally, especially if you have kids, family, house, all of these kind of things, right? Like it's usually not a rage quit.
Right.
The successful people are ones who recognize that there is a long timeline. We have to give ourselves grace to try and fail and figure things out. And what helps? Runway.
Yeah.
The runway is either money in the bank savings, or it is keeping your job in some capacity. Maybe it's going to part-time work while you carve out time to work on the thing. There's a number of levers you can pull, like you said, but it ends up coming down to like your risk tolerance and your runway. It's not one or the other. There's a number of ways you can solve that problem. And it's not just like, oh, really risk tolerant people go create businesses. You can do these things in a very methodical way. For me, it was like 12 months. I took 12 months to really figure out what I was doing. I was building as I was working a corporate job. I had 3 kids under the age of 7, I believe. Like, you can do these things, but you have to set the boundaries to have space. You have to have some type of regimented program where you're able to do the thing that you need to do every day, and you need to have some good runway. So I'll kick it back to you after those comments.
No. Thanks for coloring that in there. And I think, well, one, remember, you don't have to leave corporate. No. You might say, you know what? I have a job where it's like, they don't really bother me too much. I'd rather not do it. But if you're doing something, again, going back to priorities, hey, I get to do, date nights with my spouse. So I get to play golf on the weekends where I like. I'd like to do these other things, and you're enjoying life. Okay, don't blow it up just because it looks cool to start your own business, because as you know, it's not easy. So that and by the way, though, lead to what we're talking about. That's why I think building on the side is so important. If you can't put an hour a week or a couple hours a week into growing a business on the side, how are you going to do it full time?
Right.
Not going to happen. So start there and see and prototype it and say, hey, can I build this out in a smaller capacity? So when I do have full time, then I can just blow this up and just make this, exponential growth if I want, so that's step one. And then step two is, again, knowing what you want. Like, what kind of lifestyle do you want? I think is really important. And that's what I've always looked at is like, again, what do I want? Flexibility. I want the autonomy. I want some control. I want to be able to do certain things. When I want to be able to travel, but also do work if I want. Like, if I want to take off a month, I want to be able to do that because for whatever reason. So I think knowing kind of what you want can help you lead in that direction versus, again, just cash it in and say, I'm always going to be in corporate. Well, okay, well, that's a defeatist attitude. But if you're like, I really want these 3 or 4 things. I don't have them now, but maybe in 5 years I could. How do I get to that 5-year mark? Right. The other note too, and because we're talking someone that actively leaves corporate, there's people, this just happened to a friend of mine. She got laid off out of the blue, got laid off. But I'm going to give her credit. One, she's a talented artist, but she's been building her business, her art business on the side for a couple of years prior. So here we are. She gets laid off. I bet I don't know how many people got laid off with her, 10 or 15, or as a small company. They're probably looking for jobs the next day. Now, I know she's looking for some jobs just to do it, but her and I talked last week, and she's committed to say, no, I think I'm going to try this full time. And I'm so proud of her because I'm like, yeah, now you may not have done that as quick, but now you have that opportunity in front of you. So I think we can land the plane on that. We probably talked about that a good amount. From a structure standpoint, this goes back to, I'm going to beat a dead horse here. This goes back to knowing your situation and where you're starting from. So different than you, Mike, like I'm a single dad.
Right.
And so I have a son and we have a really good co-parenting relationship. I have him every other week. The weeks I have him, my schedule looks totally different than the weeks I don't. When I don't have him, I don't have to pick him up from school. There's certain things on the weekends, we're not doing activities and stuff together. So that's when I'm going really hard. If you looked at my calendar, I would 70 to 80% of my just get started work is probably done those weeks I don't have him. And then the other 20% we'll say is the weeks I do have him. But he's still he's playing his video game right now, right? We're having this conversation. He loves playing. Okay, cool. It's not going to be all, dad 24/7. I get it. He's 12. He wants to do his own thing at times. Yeah. But we do prioritize. We have dinner together every night. We go for walks after school. We do activities. Like, those are things that are really important to me. So I prioritize those first over everything else. The weeks I don't have them, though, it's full throttle, because again, I have this vision of the future for me. I've been the phrasing I use is delayed gratification. I don't know if you use this or maybe you use that phrasing, but that thought of like, I don't care about having everything today. I care about the future, Brian. So every day, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits, but James Clear talks a lot about this. Like, I'm making a vote for myself. Like, this is the vote I'm making for future Brian today, is that I'm doing this podcast interview, or I'm trying to build the sales coaching business, or I'm writing these books or whatever. I may not reap the benefits potentially today, but it's for the future Brian. So the biggest thing for me is structuring my time out and making sure I can hit what I hit, and not doing maybe all the stuff I used to do. I used to watch 12 hours of football on a Sunday, 15 years ago. I don't do that anymore, So I've decided to reprioritize my life. I don't know how you did it, but that's the big thing. We can go into deeper how you can do that, but I think reprioritizing what's important helps us set up schedules to have the right things hit when they need to hit.
Yeah, so that actually tees up a couple of follow-up questions. So I love how you talk about future Brian, and I did the same thing. I mean, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted, what my life looked like, I didn't do it from the standpoint of Mike in 2018. What the fuck does he know what he wants?
Right.
I looked at my life from the standpoint of Mike, like in 15 years, because the thing that hit me was I had 15 years of time left, essentially, with my kids in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, wow, that's wild. Like, what do I want that 15 years, sort of to look like? And how do I want to feel as that future person? So I think that's really important. And I think that the identity change that you have to make is a really important thing, right? Like, if you're going to do something hard and different and change, your fastest path is actually to change who you are at an identity level. And the easiest way to do that is to think about yourself in the future. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say that. But then and I also think that is actually one of the ways that you get really clear and don't lie to yourself about what you actually want.
Yeah.
Because I do think that a huge problem that people have when they start to think about, what do I want? What do I want? We lie to ourselves if we don't have the right frame. So I'm just going to give a few examples. Like, what do you want? Okay, I want to make $100,000. What do you want? I want to make VP by the time I'm 30. What do you want? I want to have a McMansion and BMW and whatever, right? Like, because there's these default versions of success. And then you get those things, like, to your example, the guy that says, oh, I just need to make X and then I'm good. And then you get X and you're like, shit, I'm not good. I'm pretty unhappy still. How do we not lie to ourselves about what we want? And I think the future self frame is one way that you can do that. But I want to ask you, how did you do it? How did you get clear on that when you were back in the day doing this kind of stuff? And how did you know you weren't lying to yourself?
Well, I don't know if I knew I was lying to myself. All I knew was that there was kind of a couple distinct moments for me. One was, so I was a PJ professional. I used to be a teaching professional, had a teaching business in Raleigh, where I live now. But the golf industry, if we talked 20 years ago, I was going to be one of the top golf instructors in the country. Like, that was my goal. That was my vision.
Yeah.
But just something changed. I just fell out of love with not teaching, not coaching. I love doing that. It's just golf in general. And that, you're out there on nights and weekends and holidays and those type of things. And as I was, my son was born in 2012, just for some context. So like, I remember like 2010 and, my now ex-wife, but like when we were, dating and getting engaged and stuff, we were talking about like having a family. And she even asked me, because she was a lot older and she had had her career and stuff. And she was like, are you going to stick in the golf industry, or have you thought about maybe changing and stuff? And it really was a time for me to like think about talking about identity. Like, I was the golf guy in all my circles. That's what I was known as, the golf guy. You want to talk about golf, you go to Brian. And that's all I had. So it was really hard for me to get out of the industry and to leave that. But that was one of the catalyst moments for me, was like, I don't want my son to be 5 and I have to go in on a Sunday all day and teach golf just to make a living. So I made a conscious effort to change that and to figure out ways to get out of that. So that was, my son was, you talk about purpose earlier and like meaning, like my son, probably the same for you, like that changed my entire landscape of like how I thought about life, was that pivotal moment in 2012. And I think another big moment for me was in 2018 when I got separated, because that threw out everything I knew. Because here we are, growing up in the 80s and 90s in a small town in New York, like you're taught, the Disney life, like, okay, you're going to meet someone, you're going to fall in love, it's happily ever after. And then when it's not, you're kind of in this shock mode. And I'm sure people listening probably can relate to that if they've been through that. And it was really a chance for me to say, what's going on in my life? Like, what do I want? Like, am I happy with where my life is? And at the time I wasn't. So how do I become happier? And it was a continual effort. I mean, again, it wasn't happening overnight. It was journaling. It was talking to people. It was reading books. It was doing all these things to like slowly move myself in a direction of, okay, if that doesn't feel good, what about this? Okay, that didn't work. Let me do that. And what I've started to do, and now I can look back, 6-ish years and say, I'm doing the projects I want to do. I'm around the people I want to be around. And I'm just in general in life making decisions for what Brian wants. And I'm disregarding the external factors that used to influence me. Someone makes an opinion. This is why I didn't start the podcast in 2015, because people were making opinions. Like I'd talk at a party. Oh, I'm going to start a podcast. Oh, you're going to start a podcast? That kind of thing. So I think part of it is really understanding, like, we may not know the answer in 15 years, but to your point, it's what direction do I want to start in? Where do I kind of want to move? That's why I have this whole compass framework for my coaching. It's like, where do I want to go? And let's just start in the right direction. And then we continue to tweak. Yeah. We don't know what's going to go on, but I know the direction I was heading in was not the right one.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. The idea that, yes, point yourself approximately in the direction you want to go, course correct. Mm-hmm. But when you are attached to that North Star, that's, a term that you use, or that big future vision, right? That ideal vision. And you stay connected to that, you're going in the right. You can measure each action sort of against that. Like, is that bringing me closer to that vision, or further away? So I really like that. One of the things, something that you mentioned, you mentioned these periods of time that were sort of made you realize certain things, right? Having a kid, getting divorced. And I think for the people that I work with, one of the come to Jesus moments in their careers are, I bought into all of the promises of corporate, right? They told me all of these things I should do along the pathway. I did them all. And then all of a sudden I achieved some level and the outcome's not what was promised. I got laid off. I'm being pushed out because I'm older. Change is happening. Can't retire, whatever it may be. But they realize that the promises that they were led to believe weren't necessarily true. And they're like, F this, I need to do something. Yeah. So that happens a lot. And then it's just like, well, what do you do about it? How do you dig yourself out from there? And committing to saying like, all right, I got to do something else. What is it? And people are sort of stuck with the, what is it? And have a hard time dismantling all of that stuff and looking backwards to create that foundation to say like, hey, this is where I want to go. And what I tell people to do is like, if you don't know what you want, start with what you don't want. Because if you said to yourself, like, I need to make $300,000, that's what I want to do. I want to make that. And then you all of a sudden flip that around and you go, you know what? I don't want to be answering emails at 10 p.m. or I don't want to travel. Like, I'm done with travel. Well, then you don't necessarily want the $300,000. And you can start to get clear about what trumps money or what trumps the, I always say the measures of success that society has kind of given us. It's a good starting point, at least.
I love what don't you want? Because it does put up those constraints to like, because we hear this all the time. People will jump jobs to make 10,000 extra more, and then they're going in the office 3 days a week when they were working remote. It's like, hold on a second. Yeah. Why did you do that? That's not smart. So I think this goes back to, and I know I think I like where we're headed here with this is like, you don't have to know what you want. No. What you have to know though is, am I currently happy in the situation I'm in? And that's a simple yes or no. Like if we're honest with ourselves, no one, it's the same thing with like relationships. And since I've been divorced, I've, been in, dated several girls. I'm with an amazing human being right now. I'm so lucky. But it's because I did all the work to know, like, she's obviously like a good fit for me and vice versa, is because I understood what my values are. And like, if you're in a relationship where you're questioning, like, I don't like how that person makes me feel, or that's not, I don't like what they did there. Well, most likely that's going to keep up and it's going to persist. So if you're together for 5 or 10 years, you're gonna have to keep dealing with that. So it's either A, I'm willing to deal with that for whatever reason, or B, I'm not. And I think most people are scared to be alone, so they'll stick in that. It's the same with a job. They feel like they can't go get a new job. So it's like, I'm going to put up with the crap of my manager or anyone else, right? We're in such a different time now. Back when my parents and my grandparents, when they worked, like, you worked in the small town. You worked now I say small town because Endicott was kind of small comparative to bigger cities I live in now. But like Endicott was where IBM started. Like IBM mostly moved out by the late 90s. But like my grandmother worked at IBM and friends and family. My dad has been in the auto industry for his whole life. But like, you lose a job, you kind of only have so many options in the area. Now we have just really seems like endless potential globally if you really want. So I think people should think highly of themselves. Like, no, I have this skill set and I can go to another job if I want. I'm not going to put up with garbage. And I think that's why we do see a lot of people jumping more now than they used to. You probably see that, I guess, if you're talking with folks. Like, they're willing to jump because they know that they want to be valued more than just shit on, like a lot of corporations will do.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
There's two issues with it. One is like, there's almost, from my perspective, there's an infinite number of opportunities for us, which creates problems, because when you aren't anchored in what you really want, or that vision of you, or what success is and happiness and contentment is for you, you chase shiny objects all over the place. Like, I mean, this is how the whole passive income industry like is created. It's like, oh yeah, make money without doing anything. Buy my course. Like, that's bullshit. It doesn't make you happy because you're not actively creating value for somebody. You don't have a purpose. You're just like making some money so you can sit on a beach, and then what? And then the other piece is that it's sad. And I want part of my mission is to help people understand the opportunities that they do have to use their innate skill sets and advantages and interests and curiosities to make money and make a living and have a lot of creativity and fun and whatever else that you want. Like, the ability to narrow your focus and not fit yourself round peg into a square peg into a round hole, right? Like, you're not sitting here going, oh, I need this job and these classifications and all of this kind of stuff. It's like, I'm me. How do I figure out how to bring out the best of me and use that towards something I care about? And I can actually make money doing that. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, what an eye-opening thing.
Absolutely. And I think you hit a good point there. It's figuring out what I think a lot of people lose focus on, because they're like, I want to do my own business, or I want to do something on the side, make some more money, do whatever. And they don't really know what to do. I always encourage is start with your number one skill. What is your number one skill? And that's why I decided, so like the Just Get Started, the nice thing with Just Get Started, and I give my mentor, Rich, a lot of credit for helping me kind of uncover this even deeper. Like Just Get Started is the high level mission. It's not the product.
Right.
That's my mission. I'm going to have a variety of different projects. Right now I have the children's books and podcasts and coaching and all this stuff. Who knows what it's going to be in a year or 5 years? And I think knowing that it doesn't have to be the everything, but that I could start. So like what I've been doing recently, I have a few clients I'm working with on the side, and something I want to do more full time is I do sales mentorship for like early stage founders and their teams. Because I see a real gap in that market. Someone that's starting a business, but they don't know how to sell. Maybe they're a developer, or they come from another side of the industry. And I'm like, sales is my number one skill. I've been extremely successful in software sales. I do it differently than a lot of folks around me. And I have that coaching ability going all the way back to coaching golf. And I've always loved that. So talking back to like how the podcast came together, It's the same thing. I'm like, well, I love coaching. Sales is a great skill for me. I want to do something where I have more flexibility and can build a bit. Okay, let's do that. So I'm not saying, sure, if Salesforce called me up or some big company said, hey, Brian, we want you to train the team. Okay, I'll take the call. But the reality is I want to focus on, like I said, founders and early stage founders, like startups, because I love working with entrepreneurs and stuff. So I think finding like, okay, I have this skill. Where could I leverage that skill? And then go try to just make $1 online. Go try to do something. Try to get one client. Try to sell one thing and just see if you can do it and then learn from there. I think too many people waste time building out this whole business plan and this massive, I got to get the website and all this stuff. No, you don't. You absolutely don't. Go talk to a few people. Use resources that are available. And again, test the waters and then pivot if you want to, or build and put steam on it if it's working.
Yep, absolutely. Conversations are data. I mean, I talk about pitching before you build, right? Like selling before you build. Because you should be able to sell somebody on a concept or your background or your skills before you've built the big actual thing, right? This is the whole concept of like human-centered design and not even wireframing, going out to a population with an idea on a piece of paper and asking for feedback, right? Like this is the experimental mode that we can be in. And to your point about starting with your number one skill, that is a great place to start. I started my business. I was in SEO, so I started websites on the side and did that kind of thing. It got me out. I don't do any of that shit anymore. You don't have to stick with it just because you've done it, but it could be your easiest and best leverage gateway out to start the process. And then you can kind of lean more into that intersection and pull on those threads of the things that you actually care about and want to do. So I love that point, but it is a start. It doesn't necessarily mean that is what you have to do. You're not in a lane just because of that skill.
Yeah. And it's why you wanted, like, why did you want to get out of corporate? Like, what was the main reason you wanted to do the SEO and get out of corporate?
Yeah. I mean, it was so much about the satisfaction of having something that I built in this world. That was it. I was like, I don't care. I had been through some experiences where I was part of startups that got fairly big and did well. I was part of some that didn't do well. And then I was in the corporate environment, and I was like, you know what? I don't care how big this thing is. I just need it to be mine. That was the feeling I was after. And so I was like, did the survey of, how do I build advantage for myself? I created a whole process for self-exploration and figuring this all out. And I was like, you know what? Well, damn it. I know stuff about SEO. Like, let's start there. And I was lucky enough to get it to a point where I could leave. And then morphed and it morphed and it morphed and it morphed to now where I'm, coaching people how to get out of corporate and build businesses. And that's not, I don't use SEO. I don't do anything. I don't care about advertising. I care about deeply helping somebody in pain change their entire life. That came, I didn't know that, just like you, right? Like,
no, you didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but I pointed myself in the right direction to allow me to experience some of these things and get closer and closer and closer to that purpose where I feel really, really damn good about what I'm doing.
And it goes back to like knowing why you want to do something. If your idea to leave corporate was, I don't know, I love watching Gary Vee online and I want to like do content,
exactly.
Okay, again, are you going to sustain this? Maybe not. But if you're like yours, and same with mine, is like, no, I have a different vision. I believe I can build something. I believe I can help, humans become better and improve their lives. I want to have the flexibility. I want to be able to do different things, whatever it is. Then build on the side, build one product, build one service, slowly move it out. And then as you start making some money, again, a lot of this comes down to your situation. Like I was mentioning before, like I've put a runway together of almost 2 years of savings. So when I leave corporate, I'm good to go. Like I said, I had a number in my mind. I've actually overachieved on that number. And other people might be complete opposite situation. They're like, I want to leave corporate, but I have $0 in the bank and I have debt and stuff. Okay, well, maybe you can't leave corporate today. But how can you make decisions in your life? And this is why I don't think it's like, I want to leave corporate, good, and we only focus on business. No, that's like, how do I make better choices with, how I take care of my body? How do I make better choices in my relationships? How do I be smarter with, okay, if I want to save money, well, maybe I need to be smart about how I save that money financially so that the future state in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, I'm ready to do this now. But again, most people, and I put myself in that, especially a lot of years ago, is like, are unwilling to make the delayed gratification, the sacrifice for 3 years to be in a happier spot. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life as we're talking today. And I can confidently say that. I bet there was years ago where I said I was happy, where I was bullshitting people. Like I can confidently say that. Well, why? Because I've made so many decisions. Some have been bad probably, but most of my decisions I made over the last 5 to 6 years have been in the direction that I want to go. And I've just led to this spot where I'm so happy and fulfilled, and I'm excited for, the things going on. Other people may be where I was 10 years ago and they have a big hill to climb. That's fine. Hopefully I'm proof that you could do it, right? You can get to a spot. When I was separated and getting divorced, like that was one of the lowest of lows for me. But I know you can pull that out. I just had a conversation with someone a few days ago that is going through that same situation. And it was a friend of a friend, and they called me to get some advice. And I know where he's at. I know where the Brian of 6 years ago was, in that spot, and the despair, and you think life's over and you're never going to meet anyone. But it gets better if you're willing to have the hard conversations with yourself to make the better decisions. A lot of times we don't. A lot of times we take the shortcut and we're like, I'll get to it tomorrow. Well, tomorrow you're still going to be pissed off or depressed or whatever if you don't make a positive step.
You could see how it happens, because so many things in our life are so much easier than thinking about those hard things, right? Like it's so easy to go on Instagram and just flip through and sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Like so many of these things are engineered to just take our attention, and they're so much easier than sitting down with a blank piece of paper and our thoughts. Yeah. So how did you employ any specific techniques, or like what were you reading or consuming, or like influences of like getting you to a point where you consistently journaled and thought deeply about these fundamental underlying, pieces of information that you needed to know about yourself? Because again, I think that's abnormal. I'm the same. I did all this stuff too, but I feel like that's abnormal in the context of today's society. Was there anything that you used, hacks, tips? Like
it probably is abnormal, which is how, not that you're competing against others, but how you blow past 99% of people and you look totally different than you did many years ago. There was a lot. There's a lot of things. Let me pick a couple. Well, one, I think this is really important, is going back and really analyzing your childhood. Now, that's also for relationships as well, which was a big thing for me to do, of how I was parented, how I was in relationships, and how I show up in future relationships. That was important. But actually, and I did this exercise with my mentor, Rich, of really looking back of like, what were the things I did really well as a kid? What do I remember? So I wasn't confident, as we already talked about, but you know what I was? I was curious. I had a lot of EQ. I had a lot of emotional intelligence, even though I could not share it. One of the things that it kind of always pained me was I don't even remember my dad telling me he loved me. Like, I don't remember like my mom a lot of times, or grandparents like saying that we didn't share emotions. You never shared that stuff. But I always wanted to. I always loved that. I was very affectionate, but I never could show it. So I had a lot of EQ. I could recognize that in other people. And I've even had people like in high school, like that I've met up after the fact, and we've talked about this. Like, I used to be the one that, like, if I saw like, people I knew were dating and I kind of sensed they were sad or something happened, I would go up and talk, and they would like confide in me about that relationship, or it wasn't working. And I would kind of be there to listen and like console them. And I always remember that. I said, oh, like, that's something I did well. Like, I could pick that up, that social awareness with people. And then another thing was my work ethic. I started a paper out when I was 11 and a half, and I did that for 6 years. So I don't know if you had a paper out, but every single morning at 5:30 a.m., rain, shine, snow, it doesn't matter. I woke up and did that. And what's funny is, as I look back of how that related to my golf game, I told you I love playing golf. I was in the industry, but I love playing. I would, in college, and I actually had a former colleague remember this and tell me a handful of years ago, he's like, Brian, I used to remember you going out there and beating balls for 3-4 hours. He's like, you were relentless with your practice. And the reason I'm telling you all this is how that relates to today. I'm just stubborn, I realized. Like, I'm going to get it done because I know I've had that in me. Now, some people may not, and they may need to build that, but you can build work ethic. You can build those practices in. It might not come as easy as it does to me because I had been doing it for so long. But whatever that is for you, and everyone's different, is go back and tap into childhood and figure out what you did really well. So it's good to look at what you sucked at and what wasn't good and what, pained you, because that's important to improve. But then what are you great at? What are things you really did well? And bring those into your life. So that's how I'm able to do the podcast for 6 straight years, not missing a week, right? I didn't tell you earlier, but I'll say it because I'm really proud of it, is like, I've been writing the book. I've also been, I did a practice this year of 50 push-ups and 50 squats every single day for the entire year I'm doing this year. And I haven't missed a day yet. So whatever that is, 250 days, whatever we're through.
Wow.
Every day minimum. I still do my other workouts. I've done races forever, but 50 push-ups, 50 squats. Like, I haven't done it today so far. When we get off of this, I'm going down to the garage and I'm going to pop these out. It seems so simple. Like, it's only 50-50, but can I do it every day? And it's that thing. So I'm saying that to say that's the first step, is look back at childhood. Where did you struggle, but also where did you excel? The second thing comes down to, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is I really started to prioritize my day. I started to look at, where was I spending time? So this is a practice I'd encourage anyone. You talk about tactical. Look at your calendar this week or next week and analyze, like, what is the stuff that really doesn't need to be on there? I have an hour meeting. Could it be 30 minutes? Or I have this block of time to do whatever. Do I really need to do that useless work or whatever? Really analyze and audit it. And then take that off the calendar. Because the people that say I'm busy, I don't have time, they aren't busy, most likely. They are procrastinating. Something's getting in the way from them of doing it. And then what I do is I put priorities in place. So notice all this whole conversation we're having is kind of like this slow checklist, like, oh, what do I want? What are my priorities? Totally. Well, now I just took stuff off my calendar and I'm going to add on my priorities first. So let's use a simple example. Let's use the fitness example. Someone says, God, I'm 50 pounds overweight. I really want to lose 50 pounds. I want to get back to this certain weight. Okay. I cannot tell you when that's going to happen. But I can tell you is if you make healthier choices every day, you're going to hit it at some point.
Right.
Probably within the next year to 2 years, most likely, if you stay consistent. So is that time blocked on your calendar to work out? Because if you have meetings blocked, are those more important than your health? Probably not. So let's block that hour out or 30 minutes or whatever it is. Okay, I want to spend time with my kids or my spouse, or again, go through your priorities and start plugging those in first. And then everything else works around it. Now, it's not going to work out perfect. Listen, if you're working for a corporation, right? Sometimes you have to be at that 3 p.m. meeting and there's just, it's out of the question. I get it. But the majority of time, let's really figure out over the next, what I encourage, again, let's start small. Take next week or the week after and say, what if I had an ideal week? What would that look like? Let me plan that out. So if it is, I want to write a book or whatever, hey, why don't I put 30 minutes here or an hour there? Let me figure some of this out. And then let's see if I can do it the following week. And maybe I have to tweak it. So let me pause there a second, because like I said, I get really passionate about this stuff. I can go on a rant, but that's kind of the starting points. It's like those 2-3 things all of a sudden move you in the right direction.
Yeah, it's new habit formation. That's what we're talking about at the base level here. And you're totally right in terms of like the checklist, or I think about all of these different things as decision-making filters. Like, okay, if you have a ideal future vision of yourself, then you can use that as a filter to make decisions. Like, is what I'm about to do aligned with that? Mm-hmm. So take your ideal week, right? Is your ideal week aligned with that vision? And oh, by the way, how much time or energy or whatever metric you want to put on it are you spending in service to that vision versus just now? And the thing that you want to do, the habit, the thing, lose 5 pounds, look better, have a 6-pack, whatever, like, are those in service of that thing? Right. And you can start to like, at least make better decisions. But the ideal week is something that I do with clients as well, to get them just aware of these blocks of time, to make them priorities. And then I will say, if you're working a corporate job, you may have to be at that 3 p.m. meeting, but there are ways you can push back on it. And we give people scripts, and we do a lot of coaching around like how we push back and make it a win-win for the company and me. Time blocking, at work, right? 8 to 10 or whatever it is, like every day, this is blocked off, and my manager knows about it, because there are ways that you can start to engineer your environment, but it starts with what are your priorities and putting those in place first. Love that. Well,
the time blocking is so important. And I think we think about this in different lights, and we never put it into practice. Is like, corporate's a great job. If you have I don't care how demanding your job is, most people have a hard time focusing for 30, 60, 90 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can do the Pomodoro method. There's so many different whatever. But instead of saying, oh, I'm going to work on this, and then, oh, an email popped up, let me go check that and do it. Like, literally focus on something. Start with 30 minutes. Put everything else away and focus. And it's amazing what happens is what could take 2 hours takes 30 minutes.
Yep.
Because you're more focused. So I like that approach. I mean, it's absolutely necessary for people to consider. And I think to the habit thing, I think a lot of it comes down, at least what I've experienced, is systems.
Yes.
It's the non-negotiables. Like, the only way habits are forming is if you, and again, this goes back to, we're talking about atomic habits, is just making it easy, making it, achievable, not getting stuff in the way. So that's why, like, let me go back to the push-ups and squats, because I think it's a good analogy to use. If I said, oh, I'm going to do 1,000 a day, I probably could. That might take me an hour, and it might be really challenging and hard to do. And it's hard to keep up if I'm going on vacation or doing that, but 50 is kind of easy. Like, when you really, even if you're not good at push-ups, 50 is kind of easy. If you're proficient, I've become very proficient and strong this year. I was kind of weak at the beginning of the year. That's why I decided the chest has always been kind of my weak part, because I'm like tall and lanky. So that's why I decided to do that. So make it easy. And that's something too. I just have to use body weight. I don't have to go to a gym. Even though I have a gym in my garage, I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to put weights on anything. I can do that wherever. So I think partly it's like building these systems, the constraints we talked about, to make it easy to change your habits. We put so many freaking barriers on our way. It's so hard to even make it habit form. So that I think you're right on the ball there.
Yeah. And one of the ways that you build a system, or at least you've been talking about, is figure out one action, make it easy, make it small, schedule that thing in there. And that's how you get started, which is amazing. I'm going to wrap up this conversation. I feel like I need to have you on again at some point so we can continue on. I could talk to you forever. So I got a few just rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap this up. I am so curious, like, what book or thought leader has been most influential and influenced your thinking the most?
Oh my gosh, influenced my thinking the most. I'll top of my head, and the answer may change tomorrow, but I'm going to give you two, because Gary Vaynerchuk probably has been extremely influential, and one of the reasons is in 2011. I got served on YouTube or a Facebook or something like that, his Inc. 500 keynote. And that was before I ever thought about entrepreneurship. Even though I had my teaching business, I didn't really think of it as like running a business. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship was like, that was the first time I was like, holy shit, like, what is this? Like, who is this guy? Like, what is he talking about? And I've been following Gary's journey ever since there. Probably don't consume as much of the content I did many years ago, but I think that's probably what he wants. He wants you to take action and do your thing. So I would say him. And then I would probably say Seth Godin. Seth Godin's been someone I've been very grateful. I've had him on my podcast, shameless plug, twice. So it's been awesome, which was huge for me, right. Which goes in a whole nother story about just asking and see, whatever happens. But I've been reading his blog for years. He writes a blog every single day. I'd encourage everyone. I think it's Seth's plural.blog, and you can subscribe. And it's just very thoughtful. They're short, they're micro blogs. It's actually the way I write is similar to him. And I think partly because I've read his stuff, I like that. That's how I consume. I like small micro content. I'm not going to write a 50-page, article. I like really short. And that's actually how I write my blogs. Because that's how I think. So I would say those two probably have been the most influential for me, from like a virtual side-ish. I mean, I certainly have mentors and all these other folks, but I'm taking it from that lens.
Perfect. What's got you excited about the next 12 months? There's a lot of chaos and craziness in the world, but what's like one thing that's just got you really optimistic and excited about the next year or so?
I think the reality is life is always chaotic. I think we always think it's the worst, the world. And I think about what my great-grandparents and my grandparents went through. I think we have it fairly easy with a lot of stuff. We've become very soft. Certainly people go through a lot of hardships, but I think we have a lot of niceties. So I'm just excited. I mean, certainly I have a lot of projects with, my aspirations to leave corporate America in 2025. And start the sales business. But really for me, it's what's the priority for me. And for me, it's my son, my girlfriend, and really spending more time with them and doing trips. We have a few fun trips coming up. I'm going to Toronto for the first time. I've never been to Toronto, and, talking about like traveling. She travels a lot, so she's kind of pushing me out of my comfort zone. So I think for me, what I've realized over the last few years is relationships and experiences are kind of the lifeblood of a great and fulfilling life. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm excited about. How many more experiences there? I signed up for my first marathon. I had an injury on the beginning of my training. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit the marathon in November. I'm hoping. So I may have to go to the half marathon, but just doing stuff like that, another Spartan race, like just activities and adventures that are pushing me outside my comfort zone. That's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Favorite golf course that you've played?
Favorite golf course all time is probably the Straits course at Whistling Straits up in Wisconsin.
Dude, that's in my backyard, basically.
Yeah.
I'm in Madison, Wisconsin.
I saw you up there. Yeah. So I've been fortunate. I played Whistling. I played like Black Wolf Run up there, Erin Hills. I'm fortunate to play a lot of those, but probably Whistling Straits, I think it'd probably be that or TPC Sawgrass, I think, in terms of like a tie. But Whistling Straits is just, have you ever played there?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's unbelievable.
It's awesome.
You know that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So yeah, I'd probably say, I mean, certainly I'd love to get out and play Pebble. And what's yours?
Yeah. So number one course, I played Kapalua in Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
This past year. And then I would also say, just from an experience, like a total experience of 3 days of just golf is, Bandon Dunes out in Oregon.
Yeah. I've heard that's special.
Both great. I'm actually I think I'll be playing Sawgrass in next March, I believe.
Okay.
So that I'll update you on what I think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool. All right. And last one is, how can people find out more about you or connect with you to continue this conversation if they've got some things that they're noodling around on?
Well, my website has all my information. So brianondrako.com, BrianOndrako.com. I write a lot on LinkedIn. I'm spending more time in there. I think if you want more of the like no touch approach, sign up for my, subscribe to my blog. I blog 3 times a week. That gets right to your inbox. Certainly reach out. I have a contact form. If you're like, hey, Brian, I'd love to catch up and chat with you, pick your brain, do whatever. Listen, I know some people are busy with stuff, but like the amount of people that have helped me in my journey, I love helping and giving back. So I don't have 20 hours potentially, but if someone's like, Brian, I need 15, 30 minutes, literally send me a note. Would love to catch up and make it work at least, or email me and, send me a contact form, whatever, and write a question there. But that's probably the best. Certainly the Just Get Started podcast. I've been doing mid 400 episodes. Been an amazing journey with that, and we're still going strong. So excited for that. So if people want to listen in, and it's kind of similar to you, a lot of the stories around getting started and really overcoming obstacles to live the most fulfilling life, I'd encourage that as well.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for being here. I love this conversation. I look forward to continuing our relationship via LinkedIn and catch-up calls or whatever it is. And to everybody out there, right? Let's not overthink it. Just get started.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Brian.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.